My father told me, "You do nothing for this family. Get out." I left without a word, but 8 days later they were begging, and everyone was left speechless. I, 32M, never thought 8 words would change everything. But there I was, standing in our family kitchen last Tuesday evening, listening to my father yell at me to get out because I did nothing for this family. The irony was not lost on me. I had just finished paying the monthly bills, electricity, gas, water, internet, like I had done for the past 3 years since moving back home after my divorce. My laptop was still open on the kitchen counter showing the confirmation screens for each payment. Dad walked in right as I was closing the browser tabs. The argument started over something small. Mom had mentioned needing groceries, and I offered to pick them up after work tomorrow. Dad overheard and began his usual tirade about how I always made promises I didn't keep, how I lived in his house rent-free and contributed nothing, and how at 32 I should have my life together instead of being a burden. I tried to explain about the bills I covered, the yard work I did every weekend, and the times I drove Mom to her doctor appointments when he was too busy. But he was already angry, face red, veins bulging in his neck. He said I was making excuses, that paying a few bills didn't make up for being a disappointment, that I was just like my ex-wife said, unreliable and useless. That last part hit different. My ex-wife's words coming from my own father felt like a physical blow. Before I could process it, he shouted those 8 words that stuck with me forever. "You do nothing for this family. Get out." I drove to my friend Mike's house across town. It was late on a Tuesday night, around 9 o'clock, and Mike was surprised to see me carrying a duffel bag. But when I explained I needed a place to stay for a few days, he didn't ask many questions. Mike had been my friend since college and knew about my family situation and my father's temper. The first few days away were quiet and peaceful. I went to work during the day, came back to Mike's place in the evening, helped him with some small projects around his house, and tried not to think about what was happening at home. I didn't call or text anyone from my family. Dad had told me to leave, so I stayed away. I also didn't set up any automatic payments for the next month's bills. I was done being taken for granted. On Saturday morning, I woke up to 17 missed calls and messages from my sister. 17. She usually barely texted me, so I knew something was wrong. Her first messages were confused, asking where I was and saying Dad was acting strange because I wasn't home. Then she said Mom was worried and asked me to call. By her last message, sent early in the morning, she was panicking, asking why the power was off and the internet was down. I stared at my phone for a moment, then replied, "Thought I did nothing." My phone immediately started buzzing with calls from her number. But for the first time in years, I felt a strange satisfaction. For 3 years, I had been the invisible support keeping the family running smoothly, and now they were finally seeing what my nothing really looked like. I spent Saturday helping Mike organize his garage, trying not to think about my family dealing with no electricity, no internet, and no hot water. But every time I remembered Dad calling me useless, the guilt I had felt for years faded a little more. Sunday brought more messages from my sister, who had figured out that the utility accounts were in my name, not Dad's. When I moved back home 3 years ago, I quietly took over the bills because Dad was behind, and I wanted to protect Mom's credit. Dad never asked how the bills got caught up. He just enjoyed not having to worry about them. My sister told me Dad was calling the utility companies trying to fix the service, but they wouldn't talk to him because he was not the authorized account holder. She said Mom was crying, Dad was furious and scared, and neighbors were starting to notice the house was dark and empty. She begged me to call and fix it. I turned off my phone and spent Sunday night watching Netflix at Mike's place, comfortable in his warm, well-lit house. Monday at work felt strange. I expected to feel guilty or worried, but instead, I felt lighter than I had in months. My coworkers said I seemed more relaxed. For the first time in years, I wasn't stressed about getting home to handle some crisis or chore that Dad would later dismiss as meaningless. On Tuesday, Mom called me at work during my lunch break. Her voice was small and confused as she asked why I had left, why the power was off, and when I might be coming home. I explained what Dad had said, how he ordered me to leave and made it clear I was not welcome. Mom went quiet for a moment, then said she didn't know about any of that. Dad had told her I had just left without explanation. When she asked about the bills, I honestly told her that when Dad said I did nothing, I thought that included the utilities I had been paying. Mom started crying, saying she had no idea I was covering everything and that Dad told her the bills were paid automatically. That conversation should have made me feel worse, but it actually made me stronger. Even Mom didn't know what I had been doing. Dad had taken credit for my work for years, letting everyone think he handled everything while I quietly kept the lights on. Wednesday came with a new tone from my family. My sister called me at work again, but this time her voice was different, less angry and more desperate. She told me that Dad had spent the whole previous day trying to get the utilities transferred into his name, only to find out that his credit score had suffered because of the past late payments. The utility companies wanted large deposits from him before they would restore service, deposits he could not afford to pay. She explained that Dad had been telling neighbors that an electrical problem was being fixed, but people were starting to notice something was wrong. Someone had even made a comment about seeing our family buying ice and batteries, which made people suspicious. Listening to this, I felt amazed that Dad's pride was costing him so much, because for years he had been so concerned about how people saw our family. Then on Thursday evening, exactly 1 week after I left, I was outside grilling burgers with Mike when my phone rang from an unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but I did. It was Dad. His voice was different than I had ever heard before, quiet and almost defeated. He asked me where I was, if I was safe, and when I might be coming home. There were no demands or anger, only questions from a man who was scared and unsure. I told him that I was staying with a friend and that I had left because he told me to go. After a long pause, he said that he had been angry when he told me to leave and had not meant for me to stay away forever. I asked him about the utilities and whether he still thought I did nothing for the family. Another long pause followed. Then he admitted that he had no idea I had been paying all those bills, and he thought they were just automatically paid somehow. For 3 years, I had been paying around $1,200 every month to keep the house running: electricity, gas, water, trash, internet, and even the lawn service that kept Dad from having to mow the lawn in the hot summers. I never asked for thanks or recognition. I just quietly did what needed to be done. Dad's voice became softer as he asked what it would take for me to come home and turn the utilities back on. I told him that I would think about it and hung up. Friday came with even more desperation. My sister told me that Dad had swallowed his pride and tried to borrow money from his brother for the utility deposits. But Uncle Jim had said he was tired of Dad's financial problems and would not help. Apparently, there had been other loans Dad had taken over the years that none of us kids knew about. My sister said that Mom was staying at a friend's house because the house was too cold without heat, and Dad was sleeping in his car some nights rather than admit to anyone what was happening. It was then that I realized I held all the cards. For years, I had been the family member everyone counted on, but no one really noticed. Now, I was the only one who could fix this crisis. On Saturday morning, I went back to the house for the first time in 8 days. Dad's car was in the driveway, but the house looked empty and abandoned. Newspapers were piling up outside, and mail was overflowing from the box. It had that strange feeling houses get when no one is really living in them. Dad opened the door, looking older than I had ever seen him. A week without heat and proper sleep had taken a visible toll on him. He invited me inside with a politeness that felt foreign coming from him. We sat together in the cold living room, and Dad did something I had never seen before. He apologized. Not just a simple sorry, but a real, deep acknowledgement of what he had said and how wrong he had been. He admitted that he had gotten comfortable with me handling everything and had somehow convinced himself that made me lazy rather than helpful. He asked me what I needed to hear from him, what it would take to fix this broken trust between us. I told him that I needed him to admit in front of Mom and my sister exactly what I had been doing for the family. I needed him to understand that calling me useless when I was single-handedly keeping the family running was not just wrong but cruel. To my surprise, Dad agreed immediately. I had expected resistance or arguments, but it seemed that the consequences of that week had taught him a hard lesson. I took out my phone and called the utility companies right there in front of him, scheduling the service to be reconnected that afternoon. Watching the relief spread across his face was better than any apology could have been. Mom came home that evening, and Dad kept his word. In front of her and my sister, he explained exactly how much I had been contributing financially and practically. He said he was wrong to dismiss my efforts and that the family had relied on me more than anyone realized. My sister looked stunned, and Mom cried again, this time from embarrassment for not knowing. Dad looked tired, but determined to make things right. After that week, things changed a lot between us. About 3 weeks after I moved back home, Dad started acting very different when it came to family responsibilities. He made a spreadsheet to track who paid what for family expenses. He insisted that the utility bills be split 3 ways between him, Mom, and me. He even began doing his own grocery shopping instead of expecting Mom to handle everything. Dad also started talking about retirement and money in a way I had never heard before. The most surprising thing was when he called a family meeting about a month after the power went out. He told us that he had started seeing a counselor for his anger problems. He said that the week without electricity had made him think about how he treated people, especially me. He didn't like what he learned about himself. He apologized again, this time more fully, and asked if I would go to a few counseling sessions with him to help us communicate better. I said yes, because I could see he was really trying to change. 6 months later, our family was very different. Dad and I went to counseling for 2 months, and it helped us understand many things that had built up over the years. Dad had felt overwhelmed by money problems and had thought everyone else was using him. The counselor helped him see that his need to control everything had made him blind to what others were doing. I also learned that by quietly handling everything without talking about it, I had allowed Dad's wrong ideas to grow. We made new rules for how to share money and chores. Everything was open and honest. We knew who paid what, who did which chores, and what our family budget was. This removed many arguments and hurt feelings. My sister moved back home for a while to save money for a house, and she joined the new system. She took care of the lawn and paid some bills in exchange for a place to stay. Mom started helping more with the things Dad had been stressed about. Dad became proud of my money skills and asked me for advice about investments and retirement. Our relationship changed from fighting to working together. A year after the power went out, I got a promotion at work with a big raise. Instead of moving out right away like I planned, I decided to stay another year to help Mom and Dad pay off their mortgage. This time, it was a choice made by adults who respected each other, not an obligation filled with anger or hurt. Dad's anger did not disappear overnight, but he learned ways to control it and never again ignored someone's efforts without understanding them first. He became the father I always wanted, supportive, thankful, and emotionally there for us. The house that felt cold and hard for years became a place I liked to be. Family dinners turned into real conversations, not arguments. Mom relaxed and stopped walking on eggshells around Dad's mood swings. Sometimes I think about what would have happened if I had stayed that night and tried to argue or defend myself. Would Dad have learned what I was really doing? Would our family have fixed the problems that were slowly breaking us apart? Those 8 days without power taught them more about my value than 3 years of quiet work ever did. Sometimes people need to feel the absence of something to understand its importance. The voicemail I got on day 9, after the power was back but before I decided to come home, still stays on my phone. Dad's voice was shaky as he said he found the folder where I kept all the bills and payments. He said he had spent an hour adding everything up and finally understood what my nothing really was. He told me he was proud to have a son who cared enough to keep the family safe and comfortable even when no one noticed. He said he hoped I would come home not because they needed me to pay bills, but because they loved me and wanted me there. That voicemail reminds me on hard days that people can change, that standing up for yourself can teach others how to treat you, and that family can heal even after being broken for so long.